Right, well, we're right in the middle of Stirling. The castle's above us. This is the Church of the Holy Rood, but that hill range over there, those are the Ochils. That's Gaelic for edge. The main peak there is Dumayet, which is the fort of the Méithí, Dún Méithí. These are the people that challenged Rome. The ruined building there is Mars Wark. That was destroyed by Bonnie Prince Charlie in the siege of 1746, the last ever siege of Stirling Castle. Then as we move towards the church, there's an area fenced off. That's the Chapel Royal of James IV and his Queen Margaret Tudor. That's where all the claims to the English crown come from that ultimately end up with James I becoming James VI. This is the Church of the Holy Rood, and its tower is speckled with musket ball impacts from the Cromwellian siege. And we're actually looking round here. All the small ones are musket balls and the bigger ones are cannonballs. And what they're trying to do, the soldiers who are operating in the cemetery, are trying to catch a sniper firing out of one of these windows. And you can see the clusters of musket balls associate where they're trying to fire at a sniper, and of course the sniper's firing out and they're trying to fire up. And then finally, just beyond, we have Cowen's Hospital, the finest late medieval hospital in Scotland. Now this is not an A&E, there's no doctors here. This is an almshouse which is meant to look after decayed and elderly members of the Guildry. The Guild Brethren, and there is John Cowen himself in purple, who is known as Old Stenny-Breeks, and legend has it that the stroke of midnight every Hogmanay he jumps down and dances a jig. That's the oldest statue in the city outside the castle and dates to around 1650. Absolutely incredible. And all of the hospital has recently just been done up in a multi-million-pound project. Fantastic. Hello again. We're in the middle of the cemetery, the medieval cemetery. It's higgledy-piggledy full of stones. The oldest stone dates from the 1500s. We've got stones with musket balls on them. We've got Butch Cassidy's great uncle before he left for America, or before his children left for America. This stone features at its bottom death as a gravedigger striking down Maiden in the prime of her life. It's a reused 17th century stone. And you can see a date here, 1822, and you can see a husband and wife commemorated here, and the wife's name was Helen Stevenson. Now, someone was buried here, and they're not commemorated here, and they're not even buried here anymore. Helen Stevenson's sister, Janet, was buried here in 1821. Now, at the time, medical science was advancing, but there weren't enough fresh corpses for young doctors to dissect. So, poor old Janet Stevenson was dug up at the request of a medical student by corrupt gravedigger. Her body was sold. The newly dug, or the freshly redug corpse, the graveside was discovered the next day. There was a riot. There was actually, troops had to be called down from the castle and they fired into the crowd. The trial was abandoned because the medical student fled abroad. Forrest was his name. Eventually he was given a pardon, he joined the military, and he became Queen Victoria's private surgeon. As to Janet Stevenson, we don't know where her body is, but it's certainly not here. For me, this is just one of the most incredible places in Stirling, probably one of the most incredible places in Stirling. We've got this absolutely astonishing view. Behind me is Ben Lomond. The low-lying grass area 10,000 years ago was underwater. This was an inland sea. It's all now gone. So to my left, we've got the Valley Cemetery, which is an elaborate Victorian cemetery to extend from the old higgledy-piggledy medieval one. Then we've got the wonderful castle, and you can see the palace and the Great Hall. The palace is one of the finest Renaissance buildings in Scotland. The yellow of the Great Hall is the largest Great Hall in Scotland. Then you have Scotland's largest urban pyramid, which is the Drummond Monument, or rather built by Drummond as a celebration of political and religious martyrs looking for freedom. So it's sometimes called the Salem Rock, the Star Pyramid, and then beyond, the Myatt, the Hill of the Maethi, Dún Maethi. These are the name of the Roman tribe here in the 180s that dared to challenge the might of the Roman Empire, and their fort is still there on that rock, but it was intensively burnt down. It was vitrified, and vitrification is the process by which a timber-lace rampart is set fire. The fire is maintained for days, and the temperature is so extreme it reaches over 1,000 degrees centigrade. The water content of the rock boils out, and the stone melts and fuses, and all that took place on the Myatt, and again at Moat Hill, where we're going to go further down the line. Now this spot is also likely to be where Edward I mounted his very, very elaborate siege of Stirling Castle in 1304, where he assembled the War Wolf, possibly the largest trebuchet ever erected, and it systematically dismantled the walls of the castle. Now none of that castle is left, because after the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, when Bruce recaptured the castle, he destroyed it all. So everything that you can see above ground is really later than Bruce, all post Bannockburn. The other thing that happened here is this is where Bonnie Prince Charlie in January 1746 mounted that last ever futile siege of Stirling Castle. You can see the amount of positions, the amount of guns that they could throw at this. His position was simply blown apart, and in the exchange of fire, Mars Wark, the building we pointed to earlier on, had its roof destroyed, and it was never ever repaired. An absolutely incredible spot, soaked with history. Right, so we came off Ladies Rock because the wind was a bit much and it was interfering with the sound. So we're in the middle of the Valley Cemetery. Now all this is a Victorian cemetery. It's a very, very elaborate garden. It's laid out to celebrate Protestant reformers and martyrs, i.e. people who changed and organised religion in Scotland. The leaders of the Reformation, so John Knox, but it also commemorates those who fell in defence of the new religion. So we have the chief memorial to the Solway martyrs, the Solway maidens, women who refused to recant their faith and were tied at stakes at low tide in the Solway Firth. An absolutely horrific crime, I mean, just unbelievable. Ladies Rock, which we spoke about, now that's sometimes called, or sometimes thought to be where the ladies of the court watched jousting in the grounds below, but really it's probably Our Lady's Rock, perhaps a Catholic shrine. It is certainly where Bonnie Prince Charlie organised the last siege of Stirling Castle in January 1746. And it's also likely to be where Edward I stood directing the War Wolf siege of 1304, which of course involved the largest trebuchet ever built and systematically demolished the walls of the castle. A horrific war feat, an absolutely incredible engineering feat. Now, just one final wee treat before I go. Over here I'm going to visit the memorial to an individual who drowned on the Titanic, one of the engineers, a young man in his 20s who refused to leave his post. William Young Moyes, he was an electrical engineer. He kept the engines going so that the lights stayed on, so that the ship could be spotted at sea and more people could be rescued. So here we have William Young Moyes. This is where he is commemorated. His body was never recovered. Also, we have his brother, Alexander Moyes, who fell during World War I in something which is known as the Kaiserschlacht, which was the million-man army prepared by the Germans in World War I. The Russians had left the war, the Americans were about to join the war, so the Germans took all those spare troops on the Eastern Front and threw them at the Allies in the hope of smashing them before the Americans joined. It didn't work, but Alexander fell in France, and again he is commemorated here with his brother. So again, something well worth visiting if you come to Stirling. I hope you enjoy your trip.